Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McLean starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. So good to be on with you. Here's the question. Is Christian society dead? Should we put a fork in it? Is it over? Well, one of the symptoms we can look at, I would say, is art. It's culture, right? It's literature. We've invited Dr. Mary Cuff to be on the program to ask that question. Is great literature come and gone? Where is the great literature of yesteryear? Well, we're going to have that at 30 past the hour. Dr. Mary Cuff is going to be on to talk about the power of great literature to move hearts and minds and why we may not be writing it anymore. Brent Haynes is on at 15 past. The Department of Justice is removing international sex trafficking of minors as an area of concern. Nothing to be concerned about. Oh, move along. Nothing to see here. Yeah, I'm concerned anyway. I'm sure Brent Haynes is concerned. We'll talk more about that at 15 past the hour. Lots of great stories in the news to share with you. I would say great, but sometimes they're just depressing. Nonetheless, we are going to share the links with you to everything we discussed today in the show notes over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. That's thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Let's pray. Let's get started. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And now, your saint of the day.
Holy Roman Emperor Saint Henry II, pray for us. Henry was born in Bavaria on May 6, 972, the son of Gisela of Burgundy and Henry the Quarrelsome, the Duke of Bavaria. He was taught by St. Wolfgang, Bishop of Regensburg, who deeply influenced the boy's piety. The beloved bishop died when Henry was still a youth, but soon after the young man succeeded his father as duke, St. Wolfgang appeared to Henry in a dream, pointing out the words, "After 6, written on a wall. Henry prepared devoutly for an early death, but after 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, and even 6 years of pious readiness for judgment, Henry was still alive. He finally understood the vision when, in the year 1002, 6 years after the dream, Henry's cousin, Emperor Otto III, died unexpectedly, and Henry became Holy Roman Emperor. That same year, he was crowned King of the Germans, and in 1004, he was crowned King of Italy. Conflict with Roman influencers of the papacy prevented Henry's imperial coronation for several years, but when anti-Pope Gregory VI forced the legitimate Pope, Benedict VIII, to flee to the protection of the emperor, Henry marched on Italy to restore Benedict to the throne of Peter, and he was crowned Imperator Romanorum in St. Peter's Basilica in 1014. Henry and Benedict then held a synod together that issued decrees condemning simony and promoting clerical chastity. Henry also urged the Pope to include the filioque in the Creed in Rome, as was already done in Germany. Henry built many churches, encouraged ecclesiastical reforms throughout the empire, and constantly supported the poor. He fiercely defended clerical celibacy, and he and his wife St. Cunegonda were devoutly celibate throughout their entire marriage. After her death, Henry even attempted to become a monk, but the abbot ordered him to continue to do God's work as emperor. Henry died on July 13th, 1024, and was canonized in 1146 by Blessed Pope Eugene III. Holy Roman Emperor St. Henry II, pray for us.
And now your headline news. CNA reports the UN Human Rights Council passes religious hatred resolution. The United Nations Human Rights Council approved a controversial resolution Wednesday that urges member states to more aggressively prosecute acts of religious-based antagonism. The measure, backed by the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and passed by a 28-12 vote, calls upon member states to, quote, examine their national laws, policies, and law enforcement frameworks to identify and rectify gaps that may impede the prevention and prosecution of acts and advocacy of religious hatred. Close quote. The document referenced in part the recent incident of the burning of the Quran that took place in Stockholm, Sweden last month. The resolution called for the perpetrators of the act to be held onto account in accord with the international human rights law. The U.S. was joined by Germany, France, and several other Western nations in opposing the measure. The Daily Wire reports Iowa passes special session heartbeat bill amid raucous protest at Capitol. Iowa lawmakers passed a bill on Tuesday banning most abortions when an unborn child's heartbeat can be detected, usually around 6 weeks into the pregnancy. The bill contains several exceptions, including in cases of rape or incest. The bill was passed after Republican Governor Kim Reynolds called a special session to address abortion after the Iowa Supreme Court blocked the state's 2018 Heartbeat Act last month. Reynolds said she would sign the bill on Friday. Pro-abortion protesters showed up in force, though, chanting and yelling at Iowa lawmakers. The Post-Millennial reports Ray Epps' lawsuit against Fox News reveals he's being criminally charged by the DOJ. The details of the Ray Epps civil complaint against Fox News reveals that he is being criminally charged by the Department of Justice almost 3 years after the January 6th riot at the Capitol. In May 2023, the Department of Justice notified Epps that it would seek to charge him criminally for events on January 6th. The complaint reads, quote, the relentless attacks by Fox and Mr. Carlson and the resulting political pressure likely resulted in criminal charges, close quote. And those are your headline news. The gospel today comes to us from Matthew chapter 10, verses 7 through 15. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and do mighty works in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you evildoers. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house upon the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house upon the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it. The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Father McKeevely, writing back in the 19th century, said, our Redeemer, after having carefully cautioned them against being led astray by false teachers from the path of the true faith, now points out the necessity for all, not alone of professing the true faith, but also of performing good works and observing God's commandments, so that true faith shall not avail, nor the repeated invocation of God's name without observing his law. Close quote, Father McKeevely. Haydock, in his commentary, points it out also very succinctly. He says, quote, here Jesus Christ shows that it is not sufficient to believe in him and hear his words, but that in order to salvation, we must join works with faith. For in this shall we be examined at the last day. Now, just pause there for 1 second. I double dog dare you to go look through sacred scripture, the New Testament, and find any reference where you are not judged based on how you have lived out your faith. And I mean judgment, not statements of that you must profess with your tongue, things like that in Romans, for instance, Paul. Of course, we believe that. 100% we must do those, do that requirement. But I'm talking about being judged. Whenever the Lord speaks of your judgment, it is based on how you lived that faith that you professed, not how you made the profession with your tongue. Let that sink in. Haydock goes on to say, without faith, they cannot cry out, Lord, Lord, Romans 10. But the strongest faith without the works of justice will not be available to salvation, 1 Corinthians 13. Many who have the Lord continually in their mouths but care little about putting on the Lord or penetrating themselves with his true spirit will find their presumption and the false consciences they have made to themselves woefully disappointed. Haydock goes on to say, here he shows that even prophecy and miracles will not save us without good works. How much less will faith, unassisted by good works, preserve us from condemnation? St. Chrysostom would say the gift of miracles is bestowed on men not for their own good, but for the advantage of others. We must not then be surprised if who had indeed faith in Christ, but whose lives did not correspond with their faith, should be honored with these extraordinary gifts, since the Almighty sometimes employs as his instruments in working similar wonders men destitute both of faith and virtue. Balaam, void of faith and probity, still by the will of God prophesied for the advantage of others. Pharaoh and Nebuchadnezzar, who revealed future events of the greatest moment, and the wicked Judas himself cast out devils. Therefore, St. Paul said, if I had all faith as to remove mountains, and if I knew all mysteries and was possessed of all wisdom, but had not charity, I am nothing. Close quote. St. Chrysostom, St. Paul, pray for us. Let us pray that our faith matches how we live that faith in life, that we may be judged worthy to enter into the beatific vision. Because otherwise, it's going to get hot. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. More to come. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Coming up at 30 past the hour, Dr. Mary Cuff is going to rejoin the program. I was just reading an article over at the Imaginative Conservative written by Sean Riley, resurrecting the idea of a Christian society, looking into T.S. Eliot's work. But has the ship sailed? That's one of the questions I like to ask on this program. One of the symptoms that it may have sailed, I would argue, is literature, great literature. Dr. Cuff has her PhD in literature, so I thought I'd invite her on to talk about that very question. Where is the great literature these days? Well, she's going to join us to have that conversation at 30 past the hour. Do share us with a friend along the way if you can. That'd be very, very grateful. But I saw another article yesterday over at slaynews.com. Headline says, Biden's DOJ removes international sex trafficking of minors as an area of concern. I mean, what's to be concerned about? Nothing to see here. Move along, move along. We've invited attorney and good friend and Catholic freedom fighter Brent Haynes to comment on this. Good morning to you, Brent Haynes.
Good morning, Joe. Good morning, everyone.
Nothing to be concerned about in the international sex trafficking of minors, right, Brent? I mean, this is so old news. We can just move on now.
No, I can tell you as someone who works in law enforcement, Joe, nothing at all. You can go about your regular business. Nothing to see here.
Unbelievable. Why? Help me understand. Help me wrap my head around this. Why in the world would this not be an area of concern?
Well, the timing of this is interesting. According to the report, the Department of Justice scrubbed their website of this information in May. Now, many people now are familiar with the movie Sound of Freedom, which covers the story of Tim Ballard, the former federal agent who goes on a mission, actually 2 missions or so in the movie, not to give that much away about the details of the movie, to rescue some children who have been kidnapped and put into child trafficking. What is interesting about the movie is the response to the movie. You know, what's interesting from a social and political perspective. No doubt a lot of your listeners and viewers have seen the movie by now. For those who haven't, and those who haven't seen the media coverage out there, what is really interesting is the quickness, the readiness, the willingness for many people in the mainstream media to overlook the substance of the movie and the issue of child trafficking, and to immediately engage in attacks on the people involved in the movie, such as Jim Caviezel, and to engage in attacks on Tim Ballard, and to start raising questions about him, perhaps his personal faith because he is a Mormon, and his money, the claims his organization makes, and the money his organization makes. And they just sort of gloss over the issue of child trafficking, or they minimize it, or try to, not deny it, but they try to minimize it and accuse the promoters of the movie of exaggerating what the problem is. So, for example, CNN had on their program, CNN Tonight, the host of a man who hosts a podcast called The Rise of QAnon podcast. So this host of the Rise of QAnon podcast goes on CNN and says that this film and others like it are created out of a quote-unquote moral panic and bogus statistics. Okay, now I will grant you that the statistics are very difficult to get on child trafficking. We don't know the true number out there. The nature of it makes it very difficult. But to the extent we do know, any reasonable person who looks at it can reasonably conclude that the statistics the government puts out are generally going to be very conservative. They're going to understate it. It's like trying to estimate how many drugs are coming across the border. You only know how many drugs you're really caught and intercepted. You don't know how many got away. Same thing with child trafficking. You only know how many children you've rescued or you've intercepted. You don't know how many you didn't rescue and didn't intercept. But on the CNN show, the big concern of the host, the big concern of this man who hosts the vaunted QAnon, Rise of QAnon podcast, is not the problem of children being trafficked for sex purposes, for slavery purposes, or even just for labor slavery purposes. The big problem is that the people with this movie might have some other issues in this life, even assuming their claims against them are true, or that Tim Ballard might have some questions about his organization, even if those claims are true. No, let's not talk about trafficking of children. Let's just jump past that and engage in character assassination and diversion and start talking about other issues. Rolling Stone also did this. Rolling Stone had a headline that said, Sound of Freedom is a superhero movie for dads with brainworms. And the subtitle is, The QAnon-tinged thriller about child trafficking is designed to appeal to the conscience of a conspiracy-addled boomer. They ran that on July 7th, Joe. Now, I've been very busy lately. I want to support the cause, and I want to see the movie. And I was going to see it, but I wasn't going to rush out to see it immediately. But I started seeing these reports in the media about how this is a QAnon advocacy movie, essentially. So, being a lawyer, wanting to deal in the truth, wanting to know what the facts are, I went ahead and went to the theater and watched the movie with some friends last weekend. I've seen the movie. There's nothing about QAnon in the movie. There's nothing about conspiracy theorists in the movie. There's no mention of elites. There's no mention of any well-known politician in the movie. There is nothing in this movie other than the story of a federal agent who starts working a child trafficking case, and then in order to keep working on the case when he's ordered to stop, retires, starts doing that kind of work as a private citizen with his own efforts and his own contacts, and the movie continues with his rescue efforts regarding 2 children. That's what this movie is about. And what do the critics want to talk about? They want to talk about everything except the issue, Joe. And that's the context in which, or that's the context that quickly follows the Department of Justice removing their information from their website on child sex trafficking.
You know, one of the things, I talked about this yesterday on the show. I ranted quite a bit yesterday, actually, about this topic. But one of the things that gets me about the film was they actually used real footage. And part of this conversation, and right now I'm looking at an article over at the New York Post addressing this as well. The headline over there says, Sound of Freedom is real, not QAnon fantasy, says anti-trafficking hero who inspired the hit. We're going to link to this article in the show notes at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. The show notes go up right after the show goes off the air. But one of the things that gets me about this story is they used real footage of the actual bust that happened in Colombia that the movie is depicted on. They used some of it in the film itself, but in 2014, CBS did a coverage of this very story and used that actual footage back in 2014 of the actual raid that this movie is based on. This was an actual event. It really did happen. Tim Ballard was actually there. He was part of it. And even CBS knows that this is a real story. And it kills me that they've all decided that they have to protect their own and their own interest. The agenda is more important than the atrocity that's happening to those boys and girls, young men and women that are victims in this case. That should disgust everyone, no matter what side of the aisle they find themselves on. Shouldn't it, Brent?
Well, no, you just hit the nail on the head. What this reaction is about is not the substance of the issue. Remember the old saying, the issue isn't the issue, the revolution is the issue. It reminds me of what a friend of mine told me years ago, who grew up with Marxist parents when he was a young child until his parents became conservatives, and his father later in life, a prominent conservative, became a Catholic. They had moved to a small community that was predominant with communists back in the 30s or 40s. And after they became conservatives and were no longer communists, they were completely ostracized by the communists who lived in the community. Now, this was back in the days when there were actual card-carrying communists in the United States, and members of the Communist Party of the USA took their direction from the Soviet Union. I mean, these are just historical facts. This is not conspiracy stuff. And my friend tells me that his parents might be in line at the supermarket, standing right next to people they had known for years. And the people they were standing next to, who were still Marxists, still communists, would not talk to them, would not even acknowledge them. Why? Because of a fundamental principle of traditional communism: no personal relationships with enemies of the party or the people. And that philosophical concept goes hand in hand with the concept of, for the far left, everything is about politics. And everything is an opportunity to be exploited for political purposes. So there are going to be some on the left who unfortunately hold influential positions in the media, who unfortunately are able to broadcast stories on CNN, who unfortunately are able to publish stories in Rolling Stone, and they look for the opportunity to advance their cause. This is a good movie just on the merits. It's an interesting, exciting movie. You've got a good guy, you've got a bad guy, or you've got a whole team of good guys, you've got a whole team of bad guys, you've got the victims, you've got the hero. There's excitement, there's drama, there's all that tension. It's just a good movie. It is based on a true story, apparently, and that's as far as the movie goes. But what does the far left do when they see this? They can't ever admit that the other side has done something good. They can't ever admit to the truth of that issue. No, they look for somebody to attack and something to exploit. And so what do they do here? They jump over the substance of the issue, and they start attacking Jim Caviezel, for example. The host of that podcast, who was on CNN, accused Jim Caviezel of using QAnon catchphrases and concepts. Now, I don't know whether Jim Caviezel, what he actually believes in terms of QAnon, but the implication there is that if you do a movie about child sex trafficking and you start talking about child sex trafficking, then you're part of QAnon. Or if that's not what he really meant, then that entire segment on CNN, just like the article in Rolling Stone and the other media stories in this vein, are completely fraudulent and completely deceptive, because even if there are some legitimate criticisms about Jim Caviezel or about Tim Burton and how he runs his organization, that has nothing to do with what the movie says. That has nothing to do about the story the movie tells, and most of all, it has nothing to do about the truth of child sex trafficking. Everything's an opportunity for the left to advance their cause. So you're exactly right, Joe. For some people in positions of influence, they're always looking for an opportunity to advance their cause. They can never admit the other side is right. They can never give credit where credit is due. And they never rest, Joe. They never rest. And that's one reason.
Today's gospel reminds us that judgment is coming. Today's gospel reminds us that judgment is coming for all of us. And it's about how we lived the faith that we proclaimed, not the faith that we proclaimed or how we proclaimed it, but how we lived it. And reading this headline about the California Dems who block a bill to make child trafficking a serious felony, that should be very concerning. You don't want to be a part of the team that would find this issue not of a concern anymore. You don't want to be on the team that would block the bill or block the legislation that would prosecute these perpetrators in the most serious fashion. You don't want to be on that team. So think about that today. Brent Haynes, God bless you. God love you. Appreciate your insight today. Thanks for being on. God bless you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Joe.
Dr. Mary Cuff is coming up after the break. We have more breaking news and stories, and the decline of society. Literature is a symptom of that. All that and more is coming your way. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Our bumper magnets are a great way to promote the gospel as proclaimed through Catholic radio. We hear all the time from new listeners who were introduced to the station through a bumper magnet. We'd be happy to send you a bumper magnet so that others can come to know our Lord. Just go to thestationofthecross.com and find our bumper magnet request button under the About tab. That's thestationofthecross.com under the About tab.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain, and now your headline news. Breitbart reports Jim Jordan lights up Chris Wray over FBI memo targeting Catholics. House Oversight Committee Chairman Jim Jordan grilled FBI Director Christopher Wray on Wednesday over a leaked memo from the agency that detailed plans to investigate radical traditionalist Catholics. He argued the scheme was entirely motivated by politics. When Jordan asked Wray to define radical traditional Catholics, Wray said that he was aghast to learn of the memo and ordered it withdrawn and removed from the FBI systems. He claimed it was a single product by a single field office. Jordan pressed Wray to allow the Oversight Committee to interview the FBI employees of the Richmond office who crafted the memo, but the director said the agency is working on finishing the internal review and that he would brief the committee later this summer. He refused to allow them to interview the individuals. LifeSite News reports 83-year-old woman beaten while praying outside Maryland abortion facility. The unprovoked assault on Olga Fairfax occurred at a busy intersection on Saturday morning, July the 8th, in front of the Tacoma Park office building housing the Silver Spring Gynecological and Family Planning Clinic. The business offers medical and surgical abortions. Fairfax had stationed herself and her sign depicting an aborted child when, despite heavy traffic, a woman stopped her car in the road, jumped out, and proceeded to land blow after blow on Fairfax's body. Fairfax screamed, but passers-by continued on their way to shops and Starbucks next door. A man driving by stopped to assist Fairfax and eventually calmed her attacker. Two members of the Knights of Columbus who were praying the rosary about a block away also came running. One of the knights summoned the police after helping to protect Fairfax. However, the woman was gone by the time they arrived. Church Militant reports bishop covers up for rapist priest who forced teen to abort. Archbishop Ricardo Antonio Toban Restrepo of Medellin stands accused of covering up a priest who allegedly raped a 14-year-old girl and forced her to undergo an abortion. Despite these allegations, he has refused to take action regarding a rape complaint against Father Ivan Dario Restrepo Salazar, the parish priest of Our Lady of the Assumption Church in Santa Cruz, Medellin. When the victim lodged a complaint with the archdiocese, she said a priest took notes in a book and upon finishing, patted her on the shoulder, urging forgiveness, stating, quote, "They are men and they make mistakes too," close quote. No action was taken. They never contacted her again, and the victim revealed. Unfortunately, the Colombian prosecutor's office has stated that it is unable to proceed with the charges due to the expiration of the statute of limitations. And those are your headline news. Hey, good morning to the ICR listeners, iCatholic Radio. We love having you guys on the team today. Thank you for downloading the iCatholic Radio app in your mobile app store, iOS and Android. please do join us in the back end by going to thestationofthecross.com/ACT to join our email list and get access to the private group on Telegram as well. thestationofthecross.com/ACT. I saw a great quote this morning from Herman Melville. It says, "One often hears of writers that rise and swell with their subject, though it may seem but an ordinary one. How then, with me writing of this Leviathan, unconsciously my chirography expands into placard capitals. Give me a condor's quill. Give me Vucce's crater for an inkstand. Friends, hold my arms, for in the mere act of penning my thoughts of this Leviathan, they weary me and make me faint with their outreaching comprehensiveness of sweep, as if to include the whole circle of the sciences and all the generations of whales and men and mastodons, past, present, and to come, with all the revolving panoramas of the empire on earth and throughout the whole universe, not excluding its suburbs. Such and so magnifying is the virtue of a large and liberal theme. We expand it to its bulk. To produce a mighty book, you must choose a mighty theme. No great and enduring volume can ever be written on the flea, though many there be who have tried it." Close quote, Herman Melville, Moby Dick. And to, I think, expand upon this theme and this idea of a society declining before us, and where is the great literature these days, I've invited Dr. Mary Cuff. Good morning to you, Dr. Cuff.
Good morning.
I understand Moby Dick was one of your favorite literary works. If not, am I mistaken about that?
You are not mistaken. Moby Dick is my absolute favorite book. Most people struggle to get through it once. I think I might have read it 10 times by now, and I've got a few more times that I'm planning on reading it.
That's, recently I went through 2,000 Leagues Under the Sea with my kids. And one of the things about that book that struck me was the voluminous details that are included in 2,000 Leagues Under the Sea of cetaceans and every description of every creature that they happen to come across on their epic journey. And the thought struck me of literature and how it seems to me, and I would like you to get your take on this, it seems to me that literature, the way it was even, 50, 60, even 100 years ago, we just don't have that same kind of literature anymore. From the outside looking in, because I'm no literary genius, it seems to me like that ship has sailed. We don't write that kind of literature. Moby Dick isn't written today as it used to be. What say you, Dr. Cuff?
I would say that's largely true. There's a few people here and there trying to write great books. The problem is that who's their audience? Who reads that anymore on a large setting? Unfortunately, a lot of literary scholars say that the novel seems to be dying, and the reason why it seems to be dying is that people weren't taught to be able to read at that level. It's like being able to run, right? I can't run for very long. I haven't trained my limbs to be able to do that. Everyone thinks, oh, we're so literate. Everyone can read. But you have to be trained to be able to read in a particular way in order to be able to sort of do a deep dive into something big. And unfortunately, social media and technology and TV and Twitter everything is little and quick and fast. And we have sort of, as a society, have lost our ability to sit down and to really take it in, which is too bad, because that's not just a skill we need for novels. It's a skill we need for a lot of things.
You just reminded me of something I saw also over at the Imaginative Conservative, an article called Resurrecting the Idea of a Christian Society by Sean Riley. And there's this paragraph here. I'll read it. It says, "The choice we face today," Reno argues, "is the same as that of T.S. Eliot's day. We seek to live in accord with the idea of the Christian society, or will we accept the tutelage of a pagan society? But the nature of the dichotomy looks very different today than it did then, as Alexis de Tocqueville warned in the preface of The Old Regime and the Revolution. A danger of democratic societies is that the ruling passions becomes a desire for wealth at all costs, a taste for business, a love of gain, and a liking for comfort and material pleasures as the result of a tendency for democratic citizens to wrap themselves up in a narrow individuality in which public virtue is satisfied, close quote. Again, we're going to be linking to that. But what kind of caught my attention is something you just said was writers today, they write for the audience. I mean, this is good marketing 101. But at the same time, they're basically placating to their base rather than raising their base up to something greater, which is the Christian ideal, is it not?
Right. And I mean, to be fair, there have been authors in every era that have done this, but I think that it's become, I mean, with the big, sort of marketing push and the fact that anybody can publish anything and things can go viral, there's a lot of that today. And people read books the way that they, watch like a junk TV show. They just want, quick entertainment. They don't really want to have to think hard about something. If you read Moby Dick, if you read Shakespeare, if you read, there's so many of these. It's not just easy reading, I'll just read a couple pages before bedtime. Like you are invited into the deeps. Melville is writing essentially mythology in a way. He's writing epic. It's Homeric, and he wants you to really invest and go on an adventure, a real adventure. And a lot of people just don't want to do that, unfortunately, these days. And a lot of authors are looking for ways to just sort of give them a quick, cheap, 2-minute entertainment, which defeats the whole purpose of novels, I think.
Was Moby Dick a commercial success when it came out?
No, it wasn't. Melville, actually, most people don't know this. Melville wrote many novels. His first 3 novels were sort of more easy reading for the 19th century, but what counts as easy reading in the 19th century is not easy reading in the 21st century. It's still pretty difficult stuff. And then he said, you know what? I don't want to write stuff that's just kind of whatever. I want to make a difference. I want to, be meaningful. And so he started writing Moby Dick, and it was a complete flop. It was so much of a flop that people thought that maybe he was going crazy. They were like, how could you write something this commercially unsuccessful? And it took about 100 years before originally actually the British discovered it, and they were like, wow, this is amazing. And then Southern Americans, there's a whole crowd of literary guys in the South that I studied, called the Southern Agrarians. They fell in love with him. And then it kind of took the world by force. This, a lot of people call Moby Dick maybe the greatest American novel, but it took a while to be appreciated as such, which I think is actually fairly common in America. We get distracted by things, by fads in literature, in politics, and a lot of things. And then it takes a while for us to sort of sort through and find the good stuff that we have produced. I'm not like a big literary guy. My daughter actually is. She's got great talent, and she loves literature in a way that I don't think I can relate to in many ways. I was a terrible reader as a kid, and I think that makes a difference. If we don't put the work in as kids, it's harder as adults, even if we like to read. Mm-hmm. My point being, like, I was trying to think about, okay, what are the greatest literary works for today? If they exist, and I'm sure you would know what they are, I haven't heard of them, because the stuff that comes to my mind is like Harry Potter, for instance. And that's kind of what we're left with, because that's the commercially successful, low-hanging fruit stuff that I personally have issues with, and don't let my kids partake in Harry Potter. I know mileage may vary among families. But I guess I bring that up to say, you think of again, go back to 100 years. I have this list right now. I have this list of the top 100 literary novels of all time. Let me ask you a pop quiz. What would you say is the greatest novel of all time? What do you think number 1 is on this list? Well, I'm biased. I will always say Moby Dick. But if it's not Moby Dick, maybe it could be The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne.
No, actually, it's not. In fact, I'm searching here because I want to see. Moby Dick doesn't come till 21 on the list. So Moby Dick is at 21. So let that sink in for a second. If Moby Dick is 21, golly gee whiz, what in the world could be in the top 10? Well, let me share this with you, and I'll make my point after. But coming in at number 10, The Count of Monte Cristo. Great, awesome.
I hate that.
You hate that book. Oh, did you love Jim Caviezel in the film at the very least? I love Jim Caviezel in that film. It was great. Wuthering Heights is at number 9. Of Mice and Men at number 8. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn at number 7. Lolita at number 6. Crime and Punishment at 5. Jane Eyre at 4. The Great Gatsby at 3. 1984 at number 2. And coming in at number 1 of the greatest novel of all time, Pride and Prejudice. Now, my daughter would 100% agree with that assessment, probably. At number 1, anyway, Pride and Prejudice. But okay, so nothing in that top 10 list was written in the past, 10 years, 15, 25, 50 years. So the question, and we're at a break now, I hear the music. The question in my mind becomes, where is the great literature today? And you say there are people who are trying, but is it too late then? As the ship sailed, what does this mean for society? What does this mean for our future? If we are incapable of creating literature at a level at the Moby Dick or above, golly gee whiz, our future doesn't seem bright at all. That's my question. And we're going to have that conversation with Dr. Mary Cuff on the other side of the break. Hey, do me a favor, though, and do share us with a friend. We would be very grateful. You can watch the live video feed right now on our website or on our mobile app, iCatholic Radio. Download it in your app store or go to thestationofthecross.com/ACT. You'll see the live video feed there. And underneath it are the icons for where you can go and comment directly. We'll be right back. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. So good to be on with you. We're having a conversation about literature. Is this a symptom of our society today? That the fact that we don't see great literature? And I say that from a guy looking from the outside looking in, because I struggle to read. I love to read now as an adult, but I struggle to read, and I really have to force myself sometimes to sit and read a book. And I tend to read histories. I love histories. Which reminds me, Don Quixote was at 22 on this list of the best novels of all time. Really? Really? He was at Lepanto Cervantes. I mean, come on. Doesn't that get him at least at number 9 or something? Nonetheless, that's what we're dealing with. So we've invited Dr. Mary Cuff to join us to have a conversation. She has a PhD. She's an independent scholar, a writer, mom, and so much more. And she specializes in, I think, in American literature. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Cuff. So, all right. So I made the point, hopefully, that I don't see, as the knuckle dragger, I don't see any symptom or sign of great literature in the world today. And I'm sure as a scholar you do. But my point is, if the average person isn't seeing this, doesn't that mean that society is really not looking good right now? And like the future doesn't seem bright as a result of that. How do you see that?
It is sad. I will say that part of our problem is that the literary world sort of failed us throughout the 20th century. I studied the 20th century. I love a lot of 20th century American literature and British literature. But over the 20th century, there was this movement among writers. They started writing basically for other writers, or they started writing for little like cliques of readers. They didn't write for society. They didn't have that epic view. That's what Melville was doing. That's what Homer was doing. That's what Shakespeare was doing. They were writing for their society. And they were trying to draw everyone into this thing that they were doing. And throughout the 20th century, fewer and fewer and fewer people were doing that. They didn't want to write that sort of literature. And unfortunately, what that means is that they lost most of us. I don't really like reading late 20th century literature because I don't feel that it has what literature is supposed to have in it, which is a sense of wonder. It's supposed to connect us to the human. It's supposed to sort of elevate us. The greatest literature is supposed to elevate us towards the divine. J.R.R. Tolkien, one of my absolute favorite writers, he said that the act of writing, and he was saying fantasy, but I think we can sort of broaden it out to literature and fictive worlds, is subcreation. It's where we are sort of modeling God, right? In a very respectful way, right? In that he is the great creator, but he has put this thing in us that makes us want to do what he does, right? We want to create little worlds that are imitations of the great world that we are characters in. And a lot of literature throughout the 20th century just stopped doing that. It started being very sort of self-absorbed and weird, and then you kind of see the society that it's being written in, and you kind of understand why. So did the literature do that to society? Did society do that to literature? Probably a little bit of both. But I think what we need to do now, and I think conservatives, traditional people who want to see great literature again, we need to sort of break out of what literature has become and think about what made literature great for so many millennia. People have been writing, and people have been reading, and people have been listening to great literature ever since humanity first began. This is something that has stayed with us. And I would hold out hope and say that, yes, our society right now doesn't have much of that at all. But it's something that's so deeply embedded in the human soul that it will come back. It can come back. The question is, will we be around to read it? Or will it come back after our time? And I think there needs to be a push, especially among conservatives, people of faith, Christians, Catholics. We need to rediscover the importance of literature for humanity. And then we will start to see better literature.
You mentioned Tolkien a minute ago, someone whose name is infinitely famous in my house. My kids just absorb Tolkien like drinking water. It's so great. But I wonder, so if anybody who tries to make an epic today, is it just warmed over Tolkien? Are we just talking warmed over Homer? You mentioned Moby Dick sort of being along those lines. So does anybody who's trying to make a new version of an epic story, are they really just doing what has already been done, or is there anything new under the sun?
Well, I think that you can both have new things under the sun, and you can also recognize that some of the greatest literature is, at the end of the day, fan fiction. Virgil's Aeneid is sort of a Roman who said, I love the Iliad and the Odyssey. I want a Roman Iliad and Odyssey. And he made a great Roman Iliad and the Odyssey in the Aeneid. It's original, it's wonderful, but you read it and you're kind of like, I know where you got that from. There's a great tradition of artists sort of stealing from the past, not stealing from the past, but reusing the past in new and in creative ways, making something that fit into one civilization now fit into their time and their civilization. I think it would be cool if someone who has more talent in this than I do could write an Iliad for our day. I don't know what that would look like. It wouldn't have people jumping off ships to attack a city, but it would potentially have the same sorts of themes, the same sorts of ideas, the same sorts of interesting play about human nature and what motivates, men to risk all. And we could totally do that for our day and age. And it would evoke Homer, but it wouldn't just be Homer. And that's what a lot of the greatest literature is. Moby Dick, you read Moby Dick, you better have your Bible handy. He's using Jonah. He's using Job. He's using the Psalms. It's everywhere in Moby Dick. Is he just rewarming the Bible? In some ways, yes. But in other ways, he's using the Bible in order to sort of make something else that makes us, look back at the Bible and say, I really like that line, and I like how Melville used it. What does the original do? How can I learn about what Melville's doing based off of what this line in the Bible is doing? And so great literature, as T.S. Eliot says, sort of feeds off of each other and helps us understand the whole thing because it's all part of Western civilization. And it gives us this great belonging if we are deeply immersed in all of it because it's all using each other.
It just reminded me, we went through Captain's Courageous a couple years ago. We watched a movie on it. I shared it with our insiders, actually, this Captain's Courageous movie that I found just the other day, last week in our email list. And, again, using Job's themes. It's a very, prodigal son, Job, not Job, but Jonah type of themes that literature is both entertaining and also inspirational. But again, I'm just not finding that anymore. So we're going to run out of time soon. I want to ask about education, but also how would you encourage parents to, like, do we read the great books? Do we stick to great books? Or is there anything in the past, 10, 15, 25 years that you would recommend parents introduce to their children that you find to be very good? We've used Redwall as an example with our kids, something that's fascinating them. Well, but what would you say, Dr. Mary Cuff?
I would say absolutely read them the classics, and read them the classics as early as they'll sit down and read it. My 4-year-old and my 7-year-old are going through the Fellowship of the Ring right now. Are they going to get every single theme? No. Do I get every single theme? No. That's why I read it over and over and over again. That's why I've read Moby Dick over 10 times. I can always get a little bit more. A book is truly great when every time you read it, you kind of notice something else, right? Read them the classics. Read them the things that you love. Read them things that you've never read before. Maybe read it first to make sure that it's their level. In terms of what's happening now, I'm still looking for it myself. I haven't found it yet.
Yikes. That's I guess the point we're trying to make in this conversation. The world needs a revival in great literature, and but I'm so inspired by my own daughter who has a love and passion for literature, and that gives me some hope for the future. But on a societal whole, you're not going to find it too often, and we need to fan the flame of it. So God bless you, Dr. Mary Cuff. I appreciate you being on today and having this conversation with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll hopefully have her back very, very soon. But coming up, we're going to say goodbye to the radio. And then, of course, we're going to say hello to our after show conversation where we will conversate directly with you about whatever you want. And I'm curious, what would you say is the greatest novel of all time? We'll talk about it